Hi, I'm here with Kip and Ray's Zoom Art, and this week's lesson is going to be on the Renaissance period in art history. And before we begin, I wanted to talk a little bit about supplies. Even though we've talked about them before, and this is the fifth of a sequence of 5 art classes that I've taught with my son. The first thing I'd like to say is you can get acrylics very cheaply at Michael's. You can get these kinds of acrylics for like about $1 a piece. And if you get the simple basic colors, yellow, blue, red, and then a white, that is enough to begin with. So it's not something you have to spend a lot of money on. If you do want to do a little bit more, you can get a tackle box just like this. It's very handy to carry art supplies. You watch, open it up, and I have a plethora of materials. You can see we have white and black right there. Black is something you don't have to get. Brown, you don't really have to get that either because it's one you can mix. But these are the main colors, red, yellow, and blue. And usually I buy those in a cadmium. If you look on this one, it says cadmium red. Cadmium is the truest color. I have some other older ones that are phthalo, they call, and they're cheap, but you can see I'm going to use them up. Another name color is cobalt. Cobalt is fairly true also. You can use that. That's a cobalt blue. So in each of these I have a variety of different strengths of the color. But also you could have Q-tips, some little white pieces of paper towel, tape, scissors. I like oil sticks a lot, but they're messy, or some kind of wax crayon sticks. They're very fun to use. Paint brushes like this, a black permanent pen, glue stick, tape, and wipes are very handy. Instead of wipes, you can also just do an old sock like that and roll it up and stick it in there. It's very handy to have when you're painting. These are watercolor brushes, but you can put your acrylic brushes in here too, and they are different. If you're buying brushes, make sure you get watercolor for watercolor, and acrylic brushes can pretty much be any brush, but if you want to get good ones, they'll be specifically for acrylic. And then I have some pens in here and something that holds my paints. So it's very easy to organize, and it can all go in one little simple box. If you want to buy good brands, the ones I was always told and my mom had from all her years in art school are Grumbacher. Anyways, so that's so much for supplies today. Next, I'm going to talk about the artists. The key artists of the Italian Renaissance are Da Vinci, Michelangelo, Rembrandt, Botticelli. Those are the big main artists that we're going to talk about today. There are others, but those are the ones we'll focus on, and they're some of the most famous. I'm going to start with Da Vinci. Leonardo da Vinci, he painted the Mona Lisa, which is on the front of this book. He is one of the oldest of the group I just mentioned, and that's why I'm doing it in the order that I have done it. He was born in 1452 in the Italian town of Vinci, which was named after him. Or he went by that name because of that. One thing about Leonardo is he was a kind of a genius. He painted pictures of plants, insects, flowers, and animals. And he studied them as a young child. And as he got older, he really studied them. You can see he went into architectural drawing. So he was not only a great artist, he was a musician, a sculptor, a scientist, and an inventor. The big one is an inventor. During this period of the Renaissance, inventions were happening. His mentor was a man named Verrocchio. I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly. Andrea Verrocchio was in Florence. Florence was the big center of the Renaissance. It went throughout all Italy, but a lot of the artists were trained there. This is one of the most famous works by Leonardo da Vinci. It's called Virgin on the Rocks, and he actually did 2. This one is in the Louvre in France, Paris, France, and this one is in London. It's the second version of the same painting. He also did studies of machines to make money. The government wanted him to do it. It's not something he'd be interested in, actually. Machines of War was not something that interested him. His most famous work is The Last Supper. I have actually never seen this one. I've seen Virgin of the Rocks. And they sometimes say that he's in this painting. I'm not sure which one it is, but a lot of times artists paint themselves in their paintings, and that's the case with this one. Here's a closer up of the Mona Lisa in case you didn't see it before. This is the one I always thought was the most famous of his paintings, but apparently The Last Supper is. So much about Leonardo da Vinci. Next, I'd like to speak about Michelangelo. He's very, very famous. And he was not only a painter, he was a sculptor. Michelangelo, he was born in Florence, Italy, where we were just talking about, a little bit later in the 1400s, in 1475. And you can see he did a lot of sculpture. This one is called The Madonna and Child. I think I've seen it. It is in the Church of Notre Dame. No, I haven't seen that one, I'm sorry. He was trained, he ended up going to study under a man named Giotto and Masaccio, and also Donatello and Ghiberti. All these were sculpture artists, and you can see some of their works right here. This is Giotto, and he stole a lot of their styles. Donatello and Ghiberti, and down here is Masaccio. So you can kind of see a little bit of the style of art that was happening during the period when he became well known. His master artist was Ghirlandaio, and Ghirlandaio taught him fresco painting. Fresco painting was a type of painting with rock, and it made it more permanent. And because he learned that, he was commissioned to do the great work of the Sistine Ceiling in the Vatican, which is the big religious center. Now, part of the reason he became so well known is a man that was a collector named Lorenzo di Medici. He had lots of money in Florence. He hired Michelangelo to do some of his great works. This is one of the works that he did as a sculptor that's most famous. It's at St. Peter's Church in Vatican City. I have seen it. It's called the Pieta. It is absolutely amazing. If you look at it, you see the movement of the body, you see the softness of the face, you see the emotion between Mary and the Christ at his death. Because he did such an awesome job on that, Florence was getting worried. They wanted their sculpture back. So they hired him to make a larger-than-life sculpture of David in the Bible story, David and Goliath. It's amazing. I've seen this. This is in their museum called the Galleria dell'Accademia in Florence. Beautiful place to go visit. So Pope Julius in Rome decided, hey, Michelangelo, you do an awesome job of fresco painting and we love how you sculpt, but we really want you to paint. And Michelangelo did not want to paint. He loved doing sculpture work, but he was convinced to paint the Sistine Ceiling, one of his greatest works. This is the Sistine Ceiling. The Sistine Ceiling goes through all the prophets in the Bible and many of the Bible characters and Bible stories. It is an amazing work of art. I have seen it. So that's so much for Michelangelo. We'll move along to Botticelli. Botticelli is another great artist. Actually, he was born in 1444. He was the first one out of Florence to start painting that I should have mentioned him first, I guess. He was very popular and became one of Florence's most favorite artists. And here's the city of Florence. And this is the early Renaissance period before Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci became famous. And he made lots of money making beautiful works of art like the ones that are shown here. And they're very colorful compared to how it gets. They darken a lot more in the latter period of the Renaissance. He also trained under Sandro Botticelli. Botticelli learned how to mix colors and clean brushes and get walls ready to paint. He trained under some great artists. And he also had a connection with Lorenzo de' Medici, who ended up training him to become an artist, or bringing him to school. He basically financed his education. And so I'll show you a couple more works of art by him. This is Mars and Venus, Primavera, and this one's a very well-known one called The Birth of Venus. So he really got into drawing people, which becomes a big focus during the Renaissance period. And the last artist I'm going to speak about is Rembrandt. Rembrandt actually was born in the 1600s in Holland, which was very different than the other ones. Rembrandt painted darkly. Here he did a self-portrait. Many artists do self-portraits. He did another self-portrait here later in life. And there's a big change in the way he paints. But if you notice, this is something about Rembrandt that's huge. He uses lights and darks in a very powerful way to draw someone into his paintings. He loved to paint his family and relatives because he spent most of his time at home. This is his mom reading the Bible. This is his father wearing a furry cap. And this is his son, Titus. We think maybe not so focused on his studies at the moment. This is apparently one of his more famous paintings. It's called the Syndics of the Drapers Guild. And basically this is a bunch of artists, cloth salesmen who made money selling clothing, basically, in Holland. So you can see they think this was so photographic, and it really was. They didn't have cameras back then, and this is how we know who lived back then, by looking at paintings. He also painted Bible stories. This is Tobias's healing his father of blindness. And here is The Night Watch, one of the more famous ones that I have considered and evaluated as an artist. The Night Watch is in a museum in Amsterdam called Rijksmuseum Museum. And finally, you can see some more of the portraits that he has done, or close-ups of ones that other artists did. I'd like to make another point right now. You do not have to make portraits that look actually like the people. You can do work like Paul Klee, who did paintings of dreams. We mentioned him earlier. This is a young woman in a more abstract way. Here is a woman. She is crying. These are abstract paintings of people. And finally, here is an angel roping. So you can see human characteristics even in the abstract paintings. So as you consider your painting, you may want to do something abstract or realistic. Also, a lot of the characteristics of portraiture come through in characters in books. Now, Maurice Sendak is someone that is very famous as a picture book artist, and if you look at his monsters, they have a lot of human characteristics. And even his character tries to be like a monster. If you read the whole story, he goes through his house, and he goes across seas, and he eventually meets monsters. Monsters in the ocean, and monsters in the new land, creative land he's in. And they have human characteristics, the eyes, the expressions, all these things. We do need to know the human form to be artists and to make art that others enjoy. So just food for thought as you get ready to see the application portion of this lesson, which will be about drawing the human form. Thank you very much.